Hello players, if you're grinding solo in rank and looking for the best heroes to carry yourself to victory, then you're in the right place. Today, I'm breaking down the top 10 heroes that you need to master if you want to dominate the battlefield all on your own. Let's jump straight into it. Kicking off our list at number 10, we've got Favius. Favius, after his revamp, is a very strong pick. Although he cannot punish enemies with blink skills anymore, he can still benefit from them. He is less situational now and can easily defeat his opponents in the laning phase. He can go face to face with other meta explainers like Terazla and win. His ultimate is very easy to activate in battle now because you don't have to rely on people using blink skills. Plus, his sustain and burst make him a nightmare in extended fights. Favius is a good pick to fight against melee heroes, but he struggles against ranged ones due to his reliance on getting close to deal damage. To counter him, you can pick heroes like CC, Ruby, or Minsithar, who can either keep their distance or control him effectively. This is a good build that you can use on him. If the enemy has a powerful burst mage, then you can use this build. And if you want more damage, you can use this build. Next up is the Monkey King Sun. This hero is a master of deception, confusing the enemy team with his doppelgangers while dealing solid damage. In the right hands, Sun can split push like a monster and still be a threat in teamfights. Sun isn't very strong early game, so you have to play him cautiously. I prefer using the tank emblem on him to give him more HP and defense, but it really depends on your play style. During the early game, play it safe and focus on farming until you secure your first item, Thunderbelt. In this game, I am using him as a roamer. His passive ability is crucial, as it significantly reduces the physical defense of enemies, enabling your team to deal high physical damage. This makes Sun a strong tank option, but keep in mind that he lacks the ability to stun. To compensate for this, I recommend using the Petrify spell instead of Inspire, which can provide the necessary crowd control to secure kills and protect your team. To counter Sun, consider heroes like Ruby, Diroth, and Terazla, who can easily control him. Sun can be played as a fighter or jungler. If you want to use him as a fighter, here's a good build to consider. For those who prefer playing him as a jungler, this build will serve you well. Finally, if you want to play him as a tank, I recommend this build. The next hero that I recommend is Brody. If you're a marksman main, Brody is your go-to hero. His range and burst damage are off the charts, allowing you to poke enemies from a safe distance while staying mobile. His passive stacks give him a ton of damage, and his crowd control makes him a nightmare for squishy heroes. One special thing about Brody is that he deals a ton of damage to turrets. For example, it's 12 minutes into the game, and I'm already dealing 1,200 damage per hit to the turrets. Another unique feature of Brody is that he can move while using his basic attack, which makes him hard to catch and gives you an edge in battles. To counter Brody, consider picking a burst mage who can keep their distance or an assassin who can surprise him with a quick attack. Brody's mobility and burst damage are strong, but he's vulnerable to heroes who can outmaneuver him or deal heavy damage before he can respond. If your main goal is to push, deal a high amount of damage to enemies, and carry your team, then I highly recommend Brody. Here's a good build to deal high damage while having some sustain. At number 7, we've got the Immortal Warrior, Argus. When you use his ultimate, you're practically unkillable for a few seconds. Use it wisely, and you can bait the enemy into wasting their skills while you turn the tables. His ability to sustain in fights and dish out damage makes him a solid choice for solo queue. Remember, Argus is weak in the early game, so play safely. Avoid engaging in fights you're not sure you'll win. Instead, focus on split pushing and farming when your opponents are busy in team fights. Once you reach the late game, you can start dominating your opponents and potentially win the game. Remember to use his ultimate when you're just about to die, don't use it too early or too late. If your main goal is to split push and deal massive damage in the late game, then Argus is your guy. Here's a good build that you can use for Argus. Coming in at number 6, I recommend Bane. Bane is often overlooked, but he's a powerhouse when it comes to burst damage and objective control. His kit allows you to poke enemies down, heal up, and then finish them off with a massive shark attack. Bane excels in both team fights and split pushing, making him a versatile pick for solo players. You can build him as a fighter, jungler, or mage. In this game, I built him as a mage, and as you can see, I can heal significantly with his second skill and deal high damage with his ultimate. This is because his second skill and ultimate scale with his magic power. To counter Bane, you can use heroes like Cho, Martis, and Valir, who can easily stun him and evade his skills. If you want to use him as a mage, here's a good build to consider. For those who prefer playing him as a jungler, this build will be a good option. Finally, if you play him as a fighter, I would recommend this build. Ranking at number 5 is Edith. Edith is the ultimate flex pick. She can tank, deal damage, and even engage or disengage fights. Her dual form allows her to adapt to any situation, making her a great choice for solo players who want to stay unpredictable. Edith excels in teamfights and can perform ranged basic attacks in her ultimate form, dealing consistent damage while maintaining good sustain. Her first skill can knock enemies airborne for 1 second, and her second skill can throw enemies over her shoulder. These skills are incredibly annoying to deal with, which makes her a great pick for solo queue. You can play her as a fighter, roamer, or a marksman. If you want to be a frontliner for your team and still deal high damage, then I would highly recommend Edith. Her versatility and ability to adapt to any situation make her an excellent pick for those who want to lead the charge while contributing significant damage. To counter Edith in the experience lane, consider picking heroes like Yuzhong, Terizla, or Arlet. Here's a good build to consider. At number 4, we've got Terizla. Terizla is a force to be reckoned with in a solo queue. His damage output is insane, especially against squishy heroes. Not only that, but his crowd control can completely disrupt enemy formations, making him a great hero for turning the tide of battle. Terizla is all about timing and positioning, so play smart. He is currently one of the best fighters, boasting an incredible win rate of 53.80%. He can easily take down strong fighters like Yuzhong and Arlen. His ultimate plus flicker combo is a powerful way to initiate a teamfight. His passive gives him damage reduction, which makes him a beast in extended teamfights. To counter Terizla, consider using heroes like Valir, Diroth, and Carry. If you want to be your team's frontliner and teamfight initiator, then I would highly recommend picking Terizla. Here's a build that I would recommend for him. Coming in at number 3 is the Master of Summons, Zask. With his nightmaric spawn, he can dominate lanes and put constant pressure on the enemy. His ultimate turns him into a siege machine, making it nearly impossible for enemies to push against him. Zask is all about control, and once you have it, you can easily carry games. Make sure to prioritize buying Glowing Wand as your first item because it can make his spawn significantly more powerful. Play safely in the early game, especially if the enemy has a strong early game jungler. Use your first skill to clear waves, and be sure to keep a safe distance to avoid dying. In the late game, Zask becomes one of the most annoying heroes due to his consistent damage and ability to slow enemies' movement speed. If you want to carry your team as a mage and annoy your enemies, then I highly recommend this hero. Here's a build that you should consider using for him. Our runner-up is Roger, the wolf who can play as a marksman, fighter, and jungler. His ability to switch forms allows him to adapt to any situation, making him a versatile pick for solo rank. With Roger, you can easily snowball and control the entire match. He has high mobility and can chase down enemies with his second skill. His first skill deals a lot of damage and can catch opponents off guard. You should prioritize buying Windtalker as your first item because it boosts both movement speed and attack speed. After getting Boots as your second item, consider purchasing Thunderbelt. Roger can easily stack this item, which enhances his tankiness and adds extra damage. If your main goal is to carry your team and snowball in the early game, then I highly recommend Roger. To counter Roger in the off lane, you can try poking him with your skills and dodging his first skill to reduce his effectiveness. Here's a build that I would recommend if you want to play him as a jungler. If you choose to play him as a fighter or marksman, then you could use this build. If you've made it this far into the video, thank you. Please consider liking and subscribing. Let's continue into the video. And taking the top spot is none other than Gaitokaka. This tanky hero is the perfect pick for solo players who want to control team fights and lead their team to victory. His crowd control, tankiness, and ability to dive into the backline make him an absolute nightmare for the enemy team. Gaitokaka's passive grants him physical defense, making him extremely hard to kill. It also enhances his basic attack, allowing him to deal significant damage and heal himself. His ultimate is excellent for diving into the backlines and securing kills. Gaitokaka can handle multiple enemies at once due to his skill set, and he boasts impressive sustain and high damage from his passive. If you want to be the backbone of your team, Gaitokaka is your guy. He can be played as either a tank or a fighter. Here is a build that you should consider if you want to play him as a fighter, and if you want to play him as a tank, here is a build that I would recommend.